Hello, everybody. Welcome to Danger on Delmarva. My name is Rhonda Jefferson, and I'll be your host as we explore the dark and winding roads that lead around the Delmarva Peninsula. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're a returning listener, welcome back. I do appreciate you taking the time out to listen to these cases, and today, especially with one case that I'll be covering, there's not a lot of information out there, and I don't think it's really well known, but so I think it's important to get the information out about this missing persons case, even though it took place decades ago. So I will be covering two different missing persons cases today. So whereas I usually give a lot of detail about, the area's background, specifically the locale where an incident took place, I won't be going into as much detail today as one took place in Wilmington, which, we've looked at cases before from there, so I don't want to go into as much detail. And the second one, there really isn't a lot of specific information about where the individual was from. And in the second one, we'll actually be departing from what I normally cover, in that while the people involved are from Delmarva, the disappearance actually took place once they were off the peninsula. They weren't tremendously far away, but everything started out here on Delmarva, and the family is still looking for answers specifically. And it's really disappointing in some ways, where in both of these cases, there's not really a lot of information out there, especially in the first one we'll be looking at today. It's pretty much just the same information rehashed, told over and over again, with not too much added on, any website that I go to. It may come down to not having access to some of my normal resources, but, I was around, at the time where the case or where the disappearance took place, so I would have thought that I would have heard about it, but I've not heard of the case and was pretty surprised that, I hadn't seen or heard anything about it before. I was looking for information specifically about another missing person when I came across the disappearance of a little baby, just 1 month old, and, wanted to get his information out there, to remember him, and even though it's been a couple of decades, to maybe jog some memories, or someone may want to come forward with the passage of time. Now, I did just mention not having access to some of the same resources, and in my last episode, I did discuss some issues that were going on with identity theft, and it's still not resolved, the major part of it, where I just need one piece of paper from a government agency, and I've been waiting on that for 2.5 months, with even a congressman's office trying to help me with that. But I guess the wheels just turn slowly, and right now I don't want to go into too much detail, other than I did everything you're supposed to do, VPN on your computer and phone, monitoring apps, things like that, and an account was not caught on one of the monitoring apps. But again, I'll get into a little more detail once everything is resolved. So for right now, I'm not able to subscribe or keep the subscriptions to some of the normal resources that I usually use. So, there may have been 1 or 2 articles that were listed in, one of those newspaper archives, as there are a few different newspaper sites that I normally subscribe to. I'd also mentioned that I may need to migrate the podcast to a different platform as my annual subscription to this one is about to expire. But, I like using this podcast platform. And so what I'm going to do is just basically take it on a month by month basis until we get everything resolved. And hopefully, fingers crossed, that will be soon, because it's really, really wearing on every part of me right now. And, I've realized when the term identity theft is used, it's not just about, the numbers, everything used to identify you, such as your social security number. It does really feel like somebody, at least in my opinion, that someone has taken a part of me. So, sometimes that just kind of hits me when I'm thinking about, everything that's going on. But for right now, like I said, everything is pretty much going to be staying the same. I just may not be able to go back into older cases as much. But look, on the bright side, if everything is available without a paywall, that means if you want to go in and look at the information without having a subscription to any of the sources I used, you'll be able to go in and view that information. And also, before I get started, just a couple of things. All of the sources that I use will be in the description of the episode. Also, if you would like to support the podcast, there is a link to PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. Also, there is a lot of wind tonight, so if you do hear that, I apologize. And finally, the topics and the descriptions today, I want to give a listener's warning about, as it may be disturbing to listen and hear about what has possibly happened to the two missing person cases, or to the two people that disappeared. I know one really hit close to home, and I'll talk about that a little bit after we review the case. But I think that's one of the motivators to try to get the information about him out there. So with all of that being said, let's get into today's cases. So with the first case, we'll be looking at the disappearance of a baby, a 1-month-old, and his name is Shaun White. Now, if you follow the Olympics, especially the Winter Olympics, you may automatically think of Shaun White, who is an Olympian. So when you do search the name, pictures of him will come up. And even when, I tried to be more descriptive in finding information about the baby, it still sometimes brought up pictures of the athletes. So just kind of a warning there in case you do search. And one of the things that kind of hit me with this case was a lack of coverage. Sometimes if a child goes missing, then it's all over the news and you can't stop hearing about it. And even, a decade or more later, you still hear about the missing child, which I think it should be until that child is located. But then at other times, you don't really hear about it at all. Now, I do have to recognize as well that while there was some social media at the time, it really, really was in the infancy. So, sorry, no pun intended there. That it was really just beginning. It was 2002, and so some of the information may not get out as quickly as it does now. So again, we are going back to 2002, and on November 6th, little Shaun White was born. However, his mother didn't have a lot of time with him, as just over a month later, December 8th, 2002, Shaun's father, named Thurman, White picked him up for a weekend visit. Now, based on the limited information that I could find, it doesn't seem like they were living together. However, a little bit later on, the exact circumstances kind of become muddled or unclear, as there's seems to be a lot of missing information and conflicting information, and even sometimes just errors that were mentioned in one of the few paragraphs that I was able to find on this case. At the time of Shaun's disappearance, he was only about 20 inches long and weighed about 10 pounds. This was an innocent child who could do nothing to defend himself or say or do anything to let somebody know that something was wrong. And probably the most disturbing aspect of this is that the person who should have protected him the most, one of the two people who should have protected him the most, his father, is the one who was last seen or known to be with little Shaun. So Thurman White went to Shaun's mother's home. His mother's name was is Tanya Graham. And just because it does use the term weekend visit, it doesn't seem like Thurman was living with Tanya at the time. But after that visit, Thurman came back to Tanya's home, but didn't have Shaun with him. Of course, Tanya immediately wanted to know where her newborn was, and Thurman said that another woman would be dropping him off a little bit later. Now, just to kind of give an example of some of the discrepancies or errors in the reporting of this, one person who, again, wrote up some information about this did find that in some reports, the name Thurman was misspelled or misreported as Truman, whereas Tanya Graham, sometimes the name Tanya was misspelled. After about 2 hours of Tanya waiting for her little boy to come home, there was no sign of anybody coming to drop him off. An argument then ensued when, Tanya really was desperate to find out where her baby was. And at this point, in front of Tanya's other children, she had 5 other children, and Thurman stabbed her 3 times in the neck. So her little children, though their ages were not given, but no matter how old or young they were, they still witnessed their mother being attacked by, a man that should have been an example for them, should have been a role model, but he was anything but a role model. Thurman did flee immediately after the stabbing, and thankfully he did not hurt any of the children in the apartment. But police were called, emergency services were called, and thankfully Tanya was able to overcome her injuries and was actually released after a pretty short time. But Thurman did actually turn himself in to the police the following day. Initially, they charged him with second-degree assault, but they did actually upgrade the charges to attempted murder. I don't know if that was done possibly in an attempt to get him to give more information about where Shaun was, but still, Thurman did not budge. Now, he did have a previous criminal history, and I did get a lot of the information from an America's Most Wanted fan page, and they reported that some of Thurman's background included trespassing, making terroristic threats, and assaults. So Thurman did end up pleading in the case of where he assaulted and attacked Tanya Graham. The plea included the charges of assault and possession of a deadly weapon during a felony, and also endangering the welfare of a child. That, to me, was not clear whether it meant Tanya's children, but most likely it had to do with Shaun and the fact that they could not find him. Now, the sentence for the attack on Tanya was for 12 years with another 7 years of probation, which, at least in my opinion, with not knowing where baby Shaun was, that sentence seems entirely too light. The police do think that foul play was involved, and given the reaction that Thurman had against Tanya and his previous criminal history, unfortunately, that seems very likely that there was foul play involved. There is always a hope that maybe, just possibly, he was given over to a family who wanted a child but wasn't able to have one. And, they may have even thought that everything was legitimate since it was a parent that was giving the baby up for adoption. That's just a hope that we can hold out to or hold out for. But to this day, there's been no report of where baby Shaun could be. Recently, with the advancements of DNA technology, if that did in fact take place where he was given to another family, there may come a time when, he may be able to find out who he is. In, recent times, there has been, identifications made about the boy in the box, which was a child that was found in Philadelphia decades ago in a box. And it pretty much seemed like, he would never be identified, but he has recently been identified, or I guess I should say relatively recently. Another case, though not a missing persons case, that was solved a few years ago was the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders, where 3 little girls were murdered at a Girl Scout camp. And they did arrest someone at the time, and he was found not guilty. But just in the past couple of years, it was found that, yes, through advancements in DNA, since at the time of the murders, there wasn't any DNA testing. They had just gone to trial with other circumstantial evidence that they had at the time. But it has been proven, though, that the person they originally arrested was the person who committed the murders based on DNA found at the scene. So there's always hope that with advancements, really happening at a rapid pace, that if baby Shaun is out there, he, will be able to come home to his mother, his family that still misses him. But one of the questions to ponder is why Thurman, if it was foul play, what was he looking to accomplish? Why would he hurt his little baby, a defenseless baby? Was it possibly child support? Was it possibly not wanting to stay with Tanya? And as long as there was a connection, through the child, he felt that he would have to stay. We really don't know since he's not talking. And though I know looking at a picture of a 1-month-old from more than 20 years ago probably is not really going to be great at identifying him, but there is, or I will leave a link to some of the posters that were used. Also, there was an age progressed picture that was done. However, that was back in 2013 when he would have only been about 11 years old. The description of Shaun at the time of his disappearance was, again, about 10 pounds and about 20 inches. He is an African American male who had brown eyes and brown hair. And if something does ring a bell from that time period, I know it's almost 23 years ago, Thurman was living at or on the 200 block of 29th Street, and he drove a 1989 Chevrolet GM4 pickup. However, I do not have the color, so I know that's pretty vague. But if anything does ring a bell, or if you do have information, if you lived in the Wilmington area, please contact the Wilmington Police Department at 302-571-4525 or 1-800-THE-LOST. That's 1-800-843-5678. Now, like I said, this case kind of hit home because I did know children that have been killed by their father. In one case, though, it was never proven, and the person was found not guilty, even though all the circumstances did, or at least to me, it did point to him abusing the child. But I guess there was just that, reasonable doubt. And in another case, it was where the father killed his 3 children. This took place in the early 90s, so it's not as well known as some of the cases we hear about now, but I knew them through church. One of the children was in my Sunday school class, and I babysat for them once when the mother needed some help. She needed to go to the hospital, and I still think about them quite often. I think about them at least once a day. I can't think of a day that hasn't gone by that I haven't thought of them. And so it's unimaginable what Tanya and her other children and the rest of her family must be going through, not knowing exactly what happened to Shaun and hoping that he is being taken care of by a loving family. But until Thurman actually talks, we won't know any more information. And now we're going to go from baby Shaun to another case where another mother is searching for answers, though it seems pretty clear to most people in the family, and I'm sure to a lot of people who are reading and looking at the disappearance, that they pretty much know what happened. It's just a matter of trying to get answers, but given some of the responses from law enforcement, it doesn't seem like that is actually going to happen anytime soon, if ever. And this disappearance is something that seems almost unbelievable. It seems like it's something that would happen in a movie or a book, but this is very real. And Alyssa Nicole Taylor's family is living through this limbo, this nightmare every day. Alyssa was from Oak Hall, Virginia in Accomack County, and like pretty much all of the eastern shore of Virginia, Oak Hall is just a little bit above sea level at 26 feet. And according to the 2020 census, there were 255 people that lived in Oak Hall. So it's very small in terms of population, but probably then, with it being so small, everybody there knew everybody. Now, trying to find some background on this, I did find an article that actually said the population was much lower in the 60s, but I'm going to go ahead and go with the census. Now, Alyssa Nicole Taylor was 25 years old when she went missing. Her family reported her missing on September 20th, though they hadn't heard from her since September 13th. They did know where Alyssa was going and what she would be doing, but she just hadn't made that contact. And when she did leave, she said that she would be back in 2 days. By the 20th, more information had come to light that really caused extreme concern about where Alyssa may be. And again, based on some of the actions of a law enforcement agency in North Carolina, the family wanted to report Alyssa missing in Virginia. Alyssa did have children at the time of her disappearance. However, most of the articles I read mentioned 2 children, yet in something later on, it said 3 children. So again, there is even inconsistency in a recent case in terms of what I would consider basic information. It was very unlike Alyssa for her to go away for that amount of time without contacting her family, especially her children. She had let her mother know that she would be riding along or traveling with a friend who was a truck driver who would be delivering a load of frozen chickens. This friend's name was Danny McNeil, and he was 51 years old. The trip would be going from Delaware to North Carolina, so at some point he would have needed to go north to Delaware and then make his way down to North Carolina. It's unclear whether he went to Delaware first and then picked up Alyssa, but based on the wording of some of the articles, it sounded like to me that he picked up Alyssa first. If you are from the area, you probably know that Delaware, especially if he went to Sussex County, has numerous chicken houses and chicken plants. So it's not surprising that he would have to come up to Delaware to pick those up. Now, not too long after they had left Oak Hall, so they would have had to go through Oak Hall again, there's actually police body cam footage of Danny's truck with a female voice, but not being able to see the female being spoken to. What happened is in Exmoor, Virginia, a police officer noticed that this truck was parked illegally. Once, getting out of the car and approaching the vehicle, Danny was not in there at the time. He was actually visiting a friend. And as the police officer is talking to Alyssa, maybe this was kind of a foreshadowing when the officer could be heard saying, "You're riding in the truck with him and you barely know him? That doesn't sound like a good idea." However, it was not for the reason that most of us would think. However, the officer found that this was probably not the greatest idea. Now, in listening to the body cam footage, Alyssa's maternal aunt, Shelley Payton, said that that was her voice. Once Danny did come back to the truck, the officer, just let him go with a warning. They talked and explained where he was going, and he just let him go on his way. He did wait to make sure that the truck got back on the road safely. And just in case you are wondering about Exmoor, it's about 30 miles south of Oak Hall. So Alyssa left on September 13th. On September 14th, Danny McNeil ran off the road onto the right shoulder on Interstate 85 very early in the hours of September 14th. It was around 2:12 a.m., and in an attempt to correct him veering off the road, he was able to get back onto the highway, but actually ended up still crashing into a North Carolina bridge in Hillsborough. So he may have overcorrected and ended up still hitting a bridge. Hillsborough is about 250 miles from Exmoor, and the accident resulted in the truck catching fire. Now, in what I believe everybody would say is the definite contributor to why the accident occurred, McNeil's blood alcohol level was 0.32. They got this number when he was autopsied, and 0.32 is 4 times the legal limit. It was described as acute ethanol intoxication, and if you're a truck driver, you should have nothing in your system. My husband has a CDL, and he won't even take cough medicine when he's sick, even if it says, there's no alcohol or, none of the ingredients that might show up on a drug test. He will not take anything, not only because he might be tested, but he doesn't want anything to cloud his judgment. So the poor guy gets along with, cough drops and things like that. Now at 0.32, that amount can be lethal, and usually at a minimum could at least lead to a loss of consciousness. Now, as Alyssa's family is waiting to hear from her, they actually saw on Facebook a post that said Daniel McNeil had died in an accident. So upon hearing about this accident, the family went to Hillsborough. Now, while there, they visited both the junkyard where the truck was taken, as well as to the actual scene. Again, with some inconsistencies in the reporting, in some of the articles, it seems like the family found a lot of Alyssa's stuff at the crash scene, whereas in another article, it mentions where the family had gone to the junkyard and recovered a blanket that Alyssa was known to travel with and a sandal. And when they went to the actual crash scene, while they were looking, they found an earring that belonged to Alyssa. And eventually they were able to find what was described as a bucket full of items from both the site and the junkyard. So we have an accident that occurred with a man being identified, as well as he had his dog Blue with him, who was also killed in the crash. But there's no sign of Alyssa, yet her items are still there. With speaking with the North Carolina Highway Patrol, they said that there was only one set of human remains in the truck. And they reported that they went through the cab of the truck 3 times. Now, given the information that there was another person who could have been in the vehicle, North Carolina Highway Patrol did request the assistance of the Virginia Department of Emergency Management's dogs to try to search the area, but they were unable to find anything giving a clue to where Alyssa may be. So currently the Highway Patrol in North Carolina and the Accomack County Sheriff's Office are trying to work together to, find information and see if they can locate Alyssa. Now, additionally, the Highway Patrol said that they found just one cell phone at the scene, and once they were able to get data from that, it was found to be Daniel McNeil's. However, using cell phone pings, both cell phones were shown to be together very close to the time of the accident. So, given all this information, most people believe that Alyssa was in the truck at the time, but was somehow not found by the North Carolina Highway Patrol. Now, this may seem somewhat far-fetched, and actually I thought so at the beginning of, looking into this case about how any law enforcement agency could miss somebody being, in a vehicle when it was in an accident. Now, granted, it did catch on fire, and also they didn't know that another person was traveling with him. But at the same time, almost any accident that you might come upon as a law enforcement officer, you don't necessarily know how many people are in the vehicle. If it's a 2-car accident, it could be the 2 people who are driving that are involved, or there could be 5 or 6 people if, they had passengers in the vehicle. So, each accident should be approached as there could be multiple people involved in the accident, and we have to make sure that each person is given the help they need. What also, made me initially think that it could not be a possibility that they missed her being in the truck is that they were able to locate the remains of Blue, the dog. However, some things that occurred that actually, led me to think this could be a possibility. And a lot of it involved the towing company that was used to, haul away the truck as well as dispose of the chickens. Now, because it was, chickens, it was, biological, they would need to be disposed of in a different way and categorized in a different way than just, any other debris or remnants that were left at an accident scene. And also, they were covered in diesel from the truck, diesel fuel from the truck. So what was supposed to happen is that the towing company was supposed to take the chickens to be incinerated somewhere in Virginia. However, they actually took the chickens, with diesel fuel on them to a landfill. So you never know what may be in a landfill. So having diesel fuel there is kind of scary. You never know if it might interact with something. Someone might have thrown something away in their normal household garbage. And, I'm not a chemist or anything, but you never know how certain things may react. Or if there's a lightning strike, which is probably more of a possibility than, it interacting with something. But either way, the towing company took the remnants of the chickens, the debris, to a landfill when that is not how they were supposed to be disposed of. So if they're not following all procedure, could they have somehow missed Alyssa being in the truck? And though I know that the towing company is not the department or company that is handling the investigation, but it just kind of gives an overall sense that possibly the proper protocol is not being followed. Now, the North Carolina Highway Patrol has gone on to say that their efforts were exhaustive in trying to find Alyssa, but so far she has not been found. I do find it highly questionable that she would walk away from her life, and just coincidentally, the person she was, riding with had an accident shortly after. What would have had to happen is, since their cell phones were together shortly before the accident, he would have had to drop Alyssa off and then just very shortly afterwards have an accident. And then for some reason, coincidentally, that's when Alyssa decided not to go back to her life. I find that very improbable. So my thoughts did change from there's no way the highway patrol could have missed Alyssa to there is that possibility. However, I didn't see it in any, other articles, and I in no way mean to malign Danny McNeil in any way, but it was someone that apparently she didn't know extremely well, so you don't know if something could have happened prior to the accident, between Alyssa and Danny, and whatever happened did not end well. This is just a thought to explore all avenues as to what may have happened to Alyssa, but that's just again a thought. I don't want to malign him in any way, as he's not here to give his side of the story. But again, that's just covering all bases. But truly, I believe she was in the truck. And somehow with, the highway patrol looking at it as a one vehicle accident, they didn't think to look for another set of human remains. And, Blue could have been in a different part of the truck. He could have been in the front seat, or he may not have been strapped in, whereas Alyssa may have been in an area behind the truck. I couldn't find a picture of the truck or the same type of truck, but she could have been in another part of the cab where it's behind, the driver's seat. And since when the police officer was talking to her and you couldn't see her face, it leads me to believe that, it was a bigger truck and she could have possibly been in back and the highway patrol didn't see her in there, which is extremely, extremely disturbing if that was the case. And, given the fact that, the debris, the truck was taken to a landfill, then, it would be like a Hail Mary to be able to locate any remains. And that has to be absolutely heartbreaking for her family not to be able to lay her to rest, as everybody deserves, a proper service and to be laid to rest. Now, I did find an obituary that was published in August of 2024. And it was in that where I read she had 3 children, where in previous reports I had seen 2 children. So I had to go back and double check. And yes, the obituary said 3. Other articles said 2. The obituary, though it was published in August of 2024, it did actually say in there that she had died in an accident in 2022. And I just realized I don't believe I gave the year previously, but it was 2022. I do apologize for that. So it does say that funeral services were held for Alyssa, even though I didn't see anywhere that her remains have been found. It sounds like it was more of a memorial service, but I do hope that was able to bring some closure to her family. And while nothing could bring her back to her mother, her aunt, her children, at least they would have an answer as to where she is, even though they are positive as to what occurred. With the 2 years that have passed, 2+ years, it doesn't sound as though there will be a resolution in terms of finding her. Now, it was because of, the issues with them believing that, the family believing that Alyssa was in the truck, which, her earring was found there. That, to me, seems pretty definitive. But that's why the family actually reported her missing in Virginia, because they wanted the support of the Virginia police, since, their trust in the abilities of the North Carolina Highway Patrol had been dimmed, and again, the Highway Patrol wouldn't control the tow truck driver that took the debris and remnants of the crash to a wrong location, to a landfill, instead of them to be incinerated, which honestly that brings up a whole other nightmare, in that if they had been taken to be incinerated, then there would be even less of a chance that Alyssa's remains could ever be found. But just that trust was broken in terms of them doing a, full investigation. But also, again, with the off chance that someone may have seen something or knows something about what may have occurred, not knowing that it could be of significance at the time, I will leave, links to the stories with a picture of Alyssa. In many of the articles, at the time of her disappearance, she was described as being about 5'5", and it did say that in one of the reports that she weighed about 200 pounds, but looking at the picture, I don't really know if that was accurate. I guess it's always possible that she had a higher muscle mass, but it didn't look like that, at least to me. She had dark hair, it was dark brown, and she had green eyes, and she is a Caucasian female. She does have some tattoos. There's one on her lower back that shows stars and swirls. There's a rose with footprints and hearts, followed by a phrase, "If love could have saved you, you would have lived forever." And that's on her left forearm. It goes from about the middle of the forearm to the wrist. She also has some music notes behind her right ear. That information can be found on namus.gov. That's namus.gov. And that is also where I went to verify that her remains had not been found, because if they had, there would have been an update. But again, at this point, having been a couple of years, it doesn't seem as though that will be likely. And my heart goes out to both of the families, as well as any other family that is going through this limbo, this nightmare of not knowing where your loved one is. That has been the worst nightmare, after having children, about what if something ever happened and I didn't know where they were. I think anybody who's ever cared for a child, whether it's your own child or not, if you can't see them for just a few seconds, you panic. And especially then, if you are the parent, that feeling just goes, it's just like it's a drop. You feel it from, kind of your chest to the pit of your stomach. And just for the families and any family going through this, I just cannot imagine. Now, I have been finding more and more missing persons cases. So I may be covering some more of those in the future, more than I've covered in the past, because sometimes with the passage of time, people who may not have wanted to come forward previously may come forward now if they have information, or, to me, probably more likely, there may have been something that someone saw at one point in time, but didn't know, that something was going on, that there was something bad happening. But hearing about it may jog that memory, where they can provide information to help find a resolution for some of these families. So I do appreciate everybody hanging in there with me, as I'm doing about one podcast a month. I'm hoping to eventually get back to at least doing two, but like I've said in the past, I don't want to make those promises if I'm not sure if I will be able to, with some of my health issues and the treatments that I go through. But I have always been someone who likes to research, who likes to find things out, and especially when there's no resolution, it just kind of drives me to find out more about what happened. So I do hope everyone has a great rest of your day whenever you're listening to this. And hopefully, if you are on the Eastern Shore, that the wind dies down a little bit, as it's really starting to whip up around me. So hopefully that does not come through on the episode. But again, I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.